Hi, friends, and welcome to another episode of Size Bish. As promised, I wanted to do an episode today for you all in terms of the recent breaking news that has shook the Bravo sphere. Karen Huger was convicted and sentenced to 1 year in prison for her history of drunk driving. I have some interesting details that I wanted to share a little bit. There were some podcasters in like boots on the ground and, shared some really behind the scenes info with some of us. Also, Karen had some family that did a interview after the verdict because after the verdict, Karen was remanded into custody immediately. And these two relatives, I'm not sure who they were, they came out and spoke. And I did get, a screen record of that. And I posted that to my Instagram. So, let me get into it and just outline a couple of really important points here that people are really surprised. And I just wanted to kind of share my thoughts about the whole thing. So, prior to getting sentenced to 1 year in jail, there was some articles released and it just triggered something in my brain and I wanted to share my thoughts with you all. So, Karen previously went to court to try to fight her DUI, which is clearly the biggest waste of time and resources and energy, because anyone who watched that body cam footage, it's super apparent. So Karen fired her attorneys and after being convicted, and her new attorneys, David A. Martella and Barry Helfand, filed a motion prior to her sentencing, pointing to Karen's quote unquote struggles as a factor that may have contributed to her actions. Okay. So, per the filing, this is literally verbatim per the filing. They said Miss Huger's mother died on Thanksgiving morning in 2017. So she died on 11/23/17 of kidney failure and sepsis. Her father passed away 7 months later on June 28th, 2018 from complications of Alzheimer's and, quote, of a broken heart, end quote. These two losses in quick succession devastated Miss Huger, in her opinion. They may have been the straws that broke her back, leading to several errors in judgment that led to her arrest. The DUI conviction is Huger's fourth, yet she is asking for leniency. She insisted, this is wild, because when people ask, like, how did this happen? This is how it happened. Despite the fact that this is her fourth DUI, she insists that a glass of champagne and antidepressant medication caused the most recent incident. Anyone who saw that body cam footage knows that that is just the biggest load of bullshit. So here's what I want to point out, though. Karen had 3 previous alcohol-related traffic cases from 2006 to 2011. So that resulted in a guilty verdict for driving while impaired, one count of that. And then the other 2 counts were driving under the influence. Okay. So now we're at 4 total. And so, for anyone looking at this timeline, I just said that Karen's parents died in 2017 and 2018. So, may I ask, dare I ask, what caused her first 3 DUIs when her parents were alive? Yeah. I mean, it's just wild. So the courts recommended jail time for Karen, saying it is therefore the state's recommendation that Your Honor sentence the defendant to 2 years, suspend all but 6 months of executed incarceration, followed by a period of supervised probation. And Karen pled for leniency. She wrote a couple of letters, and all I can say is that the judge saw right through her excuses. So I will share with you this article in USA Today that reads in part, the Real Housewives of Potomac star was sentenced to 2 years in jail by Maryland Circuit Court Judge Terrence J. McCann. McGann, McGann is the name, McGann, with 1 year of the sentence suspended, meaning she is expected to serve 1 year in jail. Montgomery County State's Attorney's Office confirmed on Wednesday. So, in addition to that sentence, Huger faces $2,900 fines, which I could pay that. So I'm not sure how that's a deterrent, but okay. No driving at all for a year after release, and 5 years of supervised probation upon release with an interlock device, which means a car breathalyzer. So similar to what Shannon had in her car, when Karen does drive, she will have to use a breathalyzer. And those breathalyzers, by the way, they are no joke. And humans really like to test weak spots and boundaries. And this technology has really found a way around that. It can tell, who is blowing into it. It can tell you have to continue to do it also while you're driving so that you can't get in the car, start it, and then drink. Like you have to do, there are a lot of safety factors that come in here. And, so really, she's not going to be able to manipulate that. Let's see here. So I think that a couple of things that I really need to point out here is that Karen had one opportunity, a real opportunity to show the judge and whoever else in the court that she realized the error of her ways and she was making changes. She had one shot. And with that shot, Karen went to a beachfront luxury facility, which let me be clear, okay? Because there's a lot of back and forth around this. I understand treatment in California is like nothing most of us have ever experienced or understood, right? All my experiences with inpatient treatment have been on the East Coast, and the facilities here are vastly different. They are completely different. There is no luxury anything, or and listen, I mean, basic human rights, right? You get medical care, you get food, you get treatments, and not just medications, and all of they are healing. They are meant to help people heal from this disease of addiction and understand things. But I'm not going to say the name of the place just because you can Google that. But I think my point is that Karen made a choice to go to a beachfront luxury treatment facility that focuses on gentle. There was something in the wording about it, about the facility, that was like people who needed like softness. Speaking of Summer House, softness and gentle approaches. And I guess the one thing I want to say about that is denial is deadly. And sometimes when denial is at a certain point, gentle approaches aren't going to do the job. Some people, to save their lives, they need people literally shaking them, saying directly into their face, "You are killing yourself. What is going on here? Like, why is this not enough pain for you?" Like, the point is that tough situations sometimes require tough feedback. I would argue most times require tough feedback. True healing means having to understand the good, bad, and the ugly of our shit. And it's not fun. It's never fun. My therapist has to call me on stuff all the time, and I have to call myself on stuff all the time. And it's hard work, is my point. And so, what I know to be sure about judges is that they don't take kindly to excuses, to putting the public in danger, and to just flat out lies. Okay. So what this means is that the judge saw through her excuses and was irritated that she wasted everybody's time. Do you understand the the money and the resources that it takes to do a jury trial for an issue that didn't need that? Karen wasted time, money, energy, resources. And I think I just made up a new word, money and energy. I think I'm going to use that for myself. This chronic illness cost me money. Interesting. Anywho, And so I just think personally, what we heard from boots on the ground is that the judge was pissed because judges do not, they don't, you fuck around and find out, and you just get one wrong judge, and it's like, you're done. And so I believe that Karen, her step of going to this treatment facility, it just was clear that she isn't ready to admit and to see things the way that they are. And unfortunately for some folks, jail is life-saving. Jail leaves a lot to be desired in terms of, it certainly doesn't really offer rehabilitation. It's a very broken system. It's a very screwed up system. But for some people who have a history of 4+ DUIs and they clearly still aren't understanding the severity of their actions, well, then courts are gonna lay the hammer down. Karen has had all the resources, every opportunity, and she has kept tight to that denial and minimization. And so Mandy and I, we're going to do an M&M hour, by the way, next week. And so we're going to talk about this because you've heard Mandy and I argue before about, Mandy loved Karen for her delusion. And I've always said, I've always seen it as very deadly and problematic. And so I think sometimes my clinical brain, the problem is I see things like 100 miles ahead before it becomes a problem. And then in that 100 miles, people are like, oh, you're so judgmental, or no, you're not giving her a chance. And it's like, my intuition is never wrong. I've never found Karen funny or enjoyable for these reasons. And I didn't know about all this DUI stuff before because she kept it very well hidden. I just have that clinical ability, that is one of my skill sets, to see things years before it really becomes an issue, right? There are behaviors that are present when it comes to certain mental health issues or drug and alcohol issues or addictions that the behaviors you can see are very indicative of certain issues. And the one thing I just wanted to end this piece with is just recognizing the fact that addiction and people who are struggling with addiction, it's a disease and it's deserving of empathy. However, sometimes the behaviors are not deserving of empathy. Okay. So I think for those of us with empathy, it's like, well, gee, how can we be happy about someone receiving consequences? However, it's kind of one of those things where it's a duality, but we can hold Karen up and we can have empathy for the struggles and also hold her accountable for her behaviors and call those out for what they are. And so the other thing I really wanted to focus on is the fact that, the judge saw through Karen's nonsense claiming that she had a glass of champagne mixed with an antidepressant. Okay, I'm just going to do a real quick PSA. Sorry, my voice is so annoying today. I'm having a bad pain day. Excuse me, and a lot of spasms, so I think my throat is feeling it. So please excuse me. And to be honest, I don't have the energy today to edit this. So this is what you're getting. For me, a healthy compromise today, by the way, was I'm having a high pain day, but I really wanted to get this episode out to you all, and I knew I would enjoy it and it would bring me some joy. So this is my happy medium. You're gonna get the the misspeakings and just unfiltered bish, which by the way, I think is just what you all want anyway. So yay. There are, going back to antidepressants, okay, there are many different types of antidepressant medication. And so I'm going to just do a little PSA on this quick. There are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which are known as SSRIs, and they help to increase the level of serotonin in our gut and our brain in our guts, because really this happy chemical of serotonin, a lot of it does live in our guts. And so when people have gut issues, it is very common to also struggle with mental health issues because our minds and our bodies are one. And even though everyone tries to make everything separate, like eyeballs are separate and teeth are separate, and mental health treatment is different from drug and alcohol treatment, which is different from we're all one being. It requires a holistic approach. But I digress. Then there are serotonin, noradrenaline, serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which are known as SNRIs. There are tricyclic antidepressants. There are serotonin antagonists and reuptake inhibitors, known as SARIs. There are MAOIs, which are not used a ton anymore. But my point is that their science of psychiatry and mental health is growing, but there's still a lot that we don't know. And specifically, one of those tough things with mental health medications is that mental health medications, I've been on many throughout my life, and I'm happy to shout it from the rooftops and share it. Okay. So people are conflating these two ideas that antidepressants can take time to build up and work, and they can also have significant withdrawal symptoms if you don't titrate, which means to slowly get off of the medication slowly and to decrease the amount of the medication until it's out of your system. People are conflating these two issues. Okay. Karen, what she's saying was an excuse because she is not ready to say, whatever it is. And I'm not going to put words in her mouth because that's not my job. But she is weaponizing mental health and medications in a way that just sets my soul on fire. And I just won't stand for it, which I've already talked about in my last podcast. And so my point is that SSRIs and many other psychotropic medications do have to be used carefully, thoughtfully, under the guide of a mental health provider who knows what they're doing. So, psychologists cannot prescribe medication in the state of Pennsylvania. You have to be a psychiatrist or like a PCP. And I know sometimes there are ways that psychologists can prescribe, but the point is that it takes a skilled provider to understand how these medications are challenging because humans are all unique as much as everyone would like to say that we're not. We're all as unique as a snowflake. Every snowflake is different, and every person's biology, their microbiome, all of it is unique and it's different. And so what works for one person doesn't always work for another person. I've been on Lexapro for a long time. I went off of it because I felt like years ago, I felt like it wasn't having the same effect. I tried other medications. I tried Effexor. That made my brain shiver. I'm not kidding. That was really terrible. It was one of those medications that, as a professional who understands, it did just scare me as a person. And so we cannot conflate these two issues that somehow an antidepressant was to blame for Karen's drunk driving. Karen's drunk driving is caused by drunk driving. That's it. When I take my Lexapro every morning, when you take your Lexapro, which I found out, by the way, through a lot of this, is that a lot of people are on Lexapro. For me, it's just been one of the only things that's really worked. I also tried Wellbutrin and a couple other medications that I can't really remember, but my body is a nightmare and just Lexapro is what works for me. Speaking of that, I will tell you, there is technology where you can do like a medical swab of your cheek and get a list of psychotropic medications. There's categories. There's green, yellow, and red. The green is like good. The yellow is it could work, but maybe not. And then the red is supposed to not work for you. Okay. And so insurance, it's very expensive. Insurances don't cover it, but I paid out of pocket to get it done. And would you believe that my results, all the green medications were the ones that didn't work for me, that I've tried that didn't work. And in the red was Lexapro, which is the only thing that actually does work for me. So here's what I'm saying is that if you've had that done or you want to have it done, if you have the money to be able to do it and you have that you're able to, why not? Right? I say why not, but I just want to let people know straight up that sometimes even things like that is flawed because hello, Lexapro is the only thing that works for me, but according to my test, it should not. Karen needs to understand that she's weaponizing literally like a whole group of folks just because she's not ready to be honest. And so I'm grateful that I do have this platform to be able to just say, no, that's not it. That's not the move. This isn't accurate. I could probably do a whole other episode on antidepressants alone, how they work and, experiences with them. But the other thing I want to say is that I saw in an article that it may have been a anti-anxiety medication. And so here's the thing I will tell you, because I'm on both. I'm on medications for anxiety and for depression because I have complex PTSD, which requires, a lot of it requires a lot. And so I think sometimes people will use a word like antidepressant to try to like have it mean more or something because people think they'll take that seriously. But I'm wondering if it's possible that Karen was actually on an anti-anxiety medication. And sometimes with anti-anxiety medications, benzodiazepines fall in here. And with a benzodiazepine, for example, Xanax is a really good example of a medication that if you take a benzodiazepine several days for years, you will be physiologically dependent upon it. And in fact, in my practice, what I saw was a lot of folks who were prescribed a benzo by a PCP were on it for years and then came to me saying, my anxiety is bad. And it's like, okay, so these medications, not only do they require more and more over time, your body can become physically dependent. Some people had to go to treatment to get off, even though it did not start that way. It's not necessarily an addiction per se. The whole point is that these medications are life-saving, and I won't stand for them being weaponized, number one. Number two, they're very complex. And so there are two specific antidepressant medications that can create physical dependency, but they're outdated and they're not really used anymore. And like I said, in terms of benzodiazepines and certain things that are prescribed, we certainly can develop withdrawal symptoms with that. And so I know I don't want to belabor the point too much, but I just, all I have is my voice, my platform. I know a lot of people that, a lot of you in this community are survivors and thrivers and you did not care for it. And I just want you to know that you're valid, you're not alone. And I really hope that Karen, sometimes people just really need to be humbled. And unfortunately, sometimes they aren't able to achieve that on their own and they need to feel more pain. And so Karen's going to have a year to think about things and to be without substances, alcohol, whatever that may be. And so as soon as we find out more about this, I will definitely be talking about it more, but I just kind of wanted to share a little bit from that perspective, if that makes sense. And before I end this bite-sized bish, another thing that I want to say is so Mandy and I are going to be, covering Potomac. We're going to be covering Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. We're going to be covering a bunch of stuff. I just had to say, I had the most interesting experience yesterday. On Instagram, I post all of my clinical interpretations and hot takes. I take a lot of time, I write them out and I post them to Instagram. And I did one about Sutton, talking to Dorit about like she has a bigger wallet and just trying to swing her like dick around. And, it just like, I'm not a Sutton fan. I will say I'm not a Sutton fan. I think that she is entitled. I think that she's rude. I think that, and listen, I understand where it comes from. Given what we just saw on the Housewives of Beverly Hills, visiting the ghosts of her past, her father died tragically. Her mom clearly is emotionally unavailable. And so I understand it. I feel for that. But I think that for me, if I'm being honest, I don't subscribe to behaving like an asshole just because you've had a lot of trauma. And I'm going to go a step further to say this is an issue that I have to talk about in therapy because I say I came from horrifying scenarios that I've kind of, talked about here and there. But to be honest, I don't know if I'll ever really completely talk about it, but I'm telling you, I've had more bad than I've had good. I've had more trauma, more pain, more harm than I actually have good moments. And that's ultimately what complex PTSD is about. It's not necessarily about the bad stuff that happened. It's about the good stuff that didn't happen. It's about the good stuff that continues to not happen because of, all these scenarios. And so it is a very complex situation and scenario, is what I'm saying. And I sometimes think, well, if I can go out in the world and be kind and gracious and not spread my pain, my goal when I'm out in the world is if I see someone struggling, I acknowledge it and I try to bring a smile to their face. Because for me, those are the moments where my humanity really lives best, right? In those moments where I'm holding doors. I'm seeing my fellow humans. I'm saying, oh, it looks like you're having a bad day. Let me tell you a joke. Let me, I love your sweat, whatever it is. Okay. My goal is to lift myself and others up. And I just don't respect when people go the other way with it. Now I understand it. I understand it from a perspective, from a personal perspective, from a professional perspective. I understand it. I just don't respect it. And what was shocking to me is, I wrote about Sutton and how I thought what she said to Dorit was disgusting. And people like read me for filth in the comments. I was like, what? And people were like disappointed in me and like and that's the other thing about being a therapist online is like I'm a human. I'm just a person who I have a personality and I have my opinions and I'm not right. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm saying this is my thought. But people when they agree with me, they praise me. But when they don't agree with me, somehow I've done something wrong. Somehow I've disappointed them. Somehow I've whatever. And I just fortunately don't take that on anymore because like the fact of the matter is that I've talked about like how Dorit has weaponized recovery a million times. Like I am not a fan of what Dorit's doing. But what people did was conflate the fact that like I just didn't talk about how I didn't agree with Dorit for the fifth time because it's redundant. And I only have like so much time and so much energy, right? So I'm like, well, I don't need to mention this. But people were like, how could you like there were a lot of people who really don't think what Sutton said was like they thought it was iconic and they thought it was cute. And I just don't see it that way. If you think that, that's fine. You're not a terrible person. I understand. Housewives read each other for filth and they make these comments and like, that's fine. I personally see something with Sutton that irritates me. And I do not like when people have entitlement because they think that they have more than other people. Okay. It's tone deaf. It's bullshit. And especially in the world we're living in right now, it's like, do you want to align yourself with the rich people in this country? Is that what you really want to do? It just, the whole thing grossed me out. And so I guess I just wanted to put out there is that for those of you, like people are always going to misunderstand me on social media, always, always, always. And that's one thing that I've just learned to accept. The people who know me don't misunderstand me. And, people, what I appreciated is people saying like, it's wild how people were standing up for Sutton and like roasting me. And it's like, can we look at what's happening here? So, I just wanted to speak to that for a moment. I thought that was really, really interesting. And by the way, I love different opinions. I love people who disagree. I think we cannot grow or learn without having people who differ. And that's one of the things I do love about Mandy is like, she sees things differently than I see them and I respect her and she respects me and, whatever. And so I think it's just, I guess maybe just what I ask of people is to give me like a tiny bit of grace in terms of like, I'm just a person trying to stay alive and like have some fun in the process and like, also some teachable moments, some moments that can be maybe helpful or validating or whatever. Like it's not that deep. That's just what I'm trying to do here. So for those of you who always, support and have my back, even when you disagree, but you do it respectfully, thank you. I totally appreciate that. And I think this is going to be it for me today. Stay tuned for Tuesday. Will be an M&M hour. Our sweet Mandy, not only did she get COVID, she then also got the flu. And so our sweet girl is really on the struggle bus. I gave her an out to not record and she said, no, this will make me happy. So Mandy and I are going to be bringing it next Tuesday. Please stay tuned for that. A quick reminder that please check out my Patreon, Your Bish Therapist or Melissa Reich on Patreon. Please check me out on Instagram. And again, please follow me. I really am, advocating for myself this year to, I work so hard and I appreciate the ways that people really do find ways to support me. So please keep that up and thank you. And let's see, I feel like there was something else that I wanted to mention, but it flew out of my brain. And so, well, there we have it. So for today, of course, sending my love to you and yours. As always, thank you very much for your support and ta-ta for now. Disclaimer. Posts are not intended to diagnose, treat, or provide medical advice. Your Bish Therapist is for entertainment and informational purposes only. The podcast, my opinions, and posts are my own and not associated with past or present employers, any organizations, Bravo TV, Great Heart Productions, or any other television network. The information in YBT podcast and on its social media is provided for general informational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose or treat. Please do not act or refrain from acting based on anything you read, see, hear on YBT podcast or associated social media. Communicating with YBT via email and or social media does not form a therapeutic alliance. Melissa, operator of YBT, is unable to provide any therapeutic advice, treatment, or feedback.